Tropical Storm Cristobal is strengthening in the Bay of Campeche. I'm Mike Nasel with the Tropical Update. You can see obviously there in the southern Gulf of Mexico is our third named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, which we are only one day into, and that is Tropical Storm Cristobal. It is right on the coast of Campeche and Tabasco, Mexico, probably going to make landfall and then loop around and take a turn towards the Gulf Coast of the United States. But again, there are a lot of factors in play. Nevertheless, heavy rainfall and dangerous flooding for Mexico and the Yucatan is what the main threat with Cristobal is right now, and we will get on top of it. Here's the latest as of 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern from the Hurricane Center in Miami. Cristobal was at 19.1 north, 92.5 west, winds of 40. It is drifting south at 3 miles an hour, and this is very important, and I'll tell you why. And again, the pressure's been hovering around anywhere from 1,000 to 1,005 millibars, so it's not a powerful tropical cyclone, but it is strengthening slowly, and you can see the forecast track anywhere within this cone over the next 5 days. There's a lot of uncertainty, but as of right now, the forecast has it looping south, making landfall briefly, and then eventually by Friday starting to make a move, and then by Saturday and Sunday accelerating towards the North Gulf Coast, anywhere from Texas to the Florida Panhandle. You guys should be on the watch for whatever Cristobal will do. We do obviously have tropical storm warnings along the south coast because we have tropical storm winds impacting the coast there of the Yucatan Peninsula. There's the visible satellite imagery as the sun starts to go down. Look at the center is right in there. It is right near the coast. And there are all these little bays. These are very warm water, moist tropical environment. And that's why we're seeing thunderstorms flare up. But again, the problem is the rainfall, and it could be prolific with this storm. We're talking 10, 15, 20, 25 inches of rain. And you can see here this graphic that I've created. This gives a good indication of the speed of a hurricane and the amount of rainfall. So it's not intensity. It doesn't take a strong storm to create a lot of rain. So if a storm moves about 10 miles an hour, you'll get about 10 inches of rain. 5 miles an hour, 20 inches of rain. Right now, Cristobal's moving at 3, so you're talking 20, 25, 30 inches of rainfall perhaps. That is very, very dangerous and can create a lot of flooding. So it'd be nice to see this this tropical storm speed up, but as of right now, that is not in the cards. The forecast does have it looping around here, maybe making landfall, hugging the coast. It'll weaken or at least not strengthen as long as it's over land, but if it were a well-organized hurricane, it would fall apart quicker than more of a broad, ill-defined system like it is now. But once it pulls itself away, the computer models take aim at Texas and Louisiana mainly, even though, as mentioned, anywhere along the Gulf Coast needs to be on the alert. But again, it could intensify, maybe even into a hurricane by late this weekend into early next week. That is why if you live along the Gulf Coast, you guys need to have your hurricane plans in place in case Cristobal does make a move towards you. You can see the rainfall right now is the main threat near Mexico. There's the radar, the core of the storm right off the coast, right there. And you can see a lot of heavy rainfall falling right around the areas of Tabasco and Campeche, Mexico, those states near the Yucatan Peninsula. You guys have already seen dangerous flash flooding, mudslides, and as I showed in that graphic, the slower Cristobal moves, the more likely you're going to have even more prolific flooding. So it's a very bad situation. Now, upper level winds are favorable to the south and unfavorable to the north. So Cristobal's kind of stuck in between. But as this upper high gets over the top of it, the environment could become better. It could face some shear later on in the weekend and next week near the Gulf Coast. But again, strengthening is more dependent on how close it is to land or not. If it moves away from land over the warm waters, it'll intensify more. So there's a lot of factors right now in play, but the bottom line is we've got a strengthening tropical storm with prolific rainfall near Mexico. There's another look at the infrared satellite. It does have that shape. I mean, you can clearly tell it's a tropical cyclone, but land is taking a toll on it. There's some dry air, still some wind shear keeping it flat here on the northwest side. But again, as it finishes this loop and makes that turn, we'll eventually see it move back out. But again, this is 3 or 4 days out, so that's a slow time to watch it. but also a lot of heavy rain, which could be very, very problematic. Now, hurricanes making landfall in the United States in June. This is from Dr. Phil Klotzbach, the hurricane forecaster at Colorado State. This is going back to 1851. That's as long as we have records of hurricanes. You can see we have had plenty of landfalls, but all of them have been around the Gulf Coast, and a lot of them in Texas and Louisiana. So if Cristobal becomes a hurricane and does make a move in this direction, that would be, climatologically speaking, what we would expect to see with a June hurricane in the Gulf. Some interesting statistics I've gotten for you. The strongest hurricane we've ever seen in June was Audrey back in '57. That was a major hurricane, Category 3. The strongest to hit America was also Audrey. That was in Louisiana and the Texas border. Killed over 400 people with devastating surge. The last time America was hit by a hurricane in June, Hurricane Bonnie in 1986. That is a long time. We've waited 34 years, and the average should be about 9 or 10 years. So we are kind of overdue for a hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast in June. And we will see if Cristobal joins that. Whether or not it does remains to be seen. The key messages right now for Cristobal: number one, deadly flooding. As I mentioned, it already occurred in Guatemala, El Salvador, and additional heavy rain is going to impact areas of Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides, as well as tropical storm conditions. Number three, Cristobal is expected to move northward towards the Gulf Coast, but again, it is too soon to determine the exact location, timing, and magnitude. Nevertheless, interests in the Gulf Coast should monitor the progress of Cristobal and ensure that you have your hurricane plan in place. And again, we're going to be doing that here, watching the storm, watching the dangerous flooding, and watching what happens with Cristobal over the coming days. I'm Mike Naso from the IPR Tropical Update page on YouTube with the latest on the tropics, and I'll be back later with more on Cristobal.